Welcome to the Jeff Blushman Show on innovation and leadership. On this episode, I'm really excited to have Brian Murphy, founder at ReliaQuest, passed the $1 billion mark here a couple of years ago. Big name in the world of cybersecurity, and I'm really excited to hear the story and the journey. Brian, thanks for doing this.
Hey, man. Thanks, Jess. Really appreciate being on.
So the latest numbers I heard were a couple of years ago. Are those kind of the most public numbers, or are those any updates since then?
No updates on the valuation. We're beyond that, well beyond that $1 billion mark, but over 200 million in ARR, growing.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, thanks. But growing at, better than 35% a year, more than 1,100 teammates across 6 global operating centers, and more than 800 customers. So just focus in that enterprise space. So big logos, big responsibility, big problems that we're solving for.
Why don't we talk about a few of those companies that trust you guys? I saw the KKRs and some of the big names there.
Yeah, large financials, largest airlines out there, largest banks, everything from manufacturers, power companies, anybody that has an emphasis on being able to detect, investigate, and respond, regardless of where their data is stored everywhere in the world. So 65% of our customer base are multinational. So there's a lot of different things that go into securing data in different countries and different, governing laws. It's a fun job. We call cybersecurity the largest technical challenge of our generation. So it's supposed to be hard, and it definitely is difficult.
Tell me what do you tell us about Gray Matter, and tell us about what's different about you guys versus the other cybersecurity options these big companies have.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Gray Matter is it allows you to detect and then investigate and take an automated response regardless of where the data sits. So if you think about large multinational corporations or even small growing organizations, they've got data in multiple cloud environments. They have, really bespoke specific systems. You think about banks, a lot of bank institutions are still using mainframe computers, but then relying on Snowflake and relying on Office 365 and storing docs and data in Amazon and Google. And so the idea that in order to accurately secure information, we need to move all the data into one place just doesn't work in the modern technology world. And so what Gray Matter, using our uniform translator, there's more than 65 patents that make up the Gray Matter technology. And one of those patents, which is our biggest moat, is the uniform translator, which allows us to on demand pull an artifact out of wherever that data is stored, normalize it into a single data type, and stitch it into an investigation in Gray Matter. So instead of an investigation taking hours, days, weeks, you can respond to something in less than 20 minutes, and you have everything you need right in front of you to make a decision, the next right decision in cybersecurity. So what makes us different is we don't require the data storage. We're not another technology vendor wanting to store all your data, wanting to charge you for that storage. Our customers are already paying 2 and 3 times to store the same data. So we're all about the outcome for the customer, getting them to the result, getting them to the automation and the action faster without the overhead of paying more storage, more fees, which allows us to do it in minutes, not days.
And why do you think the competition hasn't copied you that way? Or why do you think that you were able to come up with something that they didn't?
So I think if you look at the competition in 2 ways, you have the large software builders, right? You have Microsoft and Google, and they're building applications, and they want you to keep all your data in their environments. And if you're a Microsoft 365 customer, you use their built-in security capability. That's great. But anytime you have data outside of that environment, it becomes really difficult, and you have to run almost 2 different security stacks, right? And so I think when you're building a piece of software, and you're dependent on the data being in that software, you're not in a big hurry to create something that allows the data to leave your environment, right? So there's that. And then traditionally, people have tried to solve this problem with outsourcing or MSSPs, or these from a distance call center type ticket managers that are going to do all the work the security team doesn't want to do. And that's never worked. They don't perform well. They don't know your environment as well. And so I think it's not necessarily that they don't want to solve the problem. It's just their core approach in their business model doesn't allow for them to be technology independent, which we are. We integrate with more than 85 different technology, and they're bilateral integrations that we manage and curate on a regular basis. So because we don't need to store the data, we can be independent and we can be both an ecosystem partner with those groups that I just talked about, but for the benefit of the customer. And I think we're the only ones that start with what problem are we solving for? Like, what is the customer trying to get done?
You know, switching gears, talking more about the business itself. Do I understand you bootstrapped it to start?
I did. Yeah. First 9 years.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What
Whew,
advice do you
painful.
have for other bootstrappers who want to be a big company?
Look, I think, whether you're backed by capital and you know this world better than I do, you've been in it and been around it, still in it. Whether you're backed by capital or bootstrapping, the problem's the problem. You know, what problem do you solve for? Is that customer finding value, and is it just an idea that you think is cool, or is it something tangible that they need? And so we've always run towards the hard problems, and I just believe in being willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And in cyber, it's hard. And so if you pick the easy path, most of the time that's not going to help your customer. And so for 9 years, I bootstrapped the business without outside capital. I think my wife and I had more than probably over $550,000 of personal debt and second mortgage, and we went through the Great Recession. I started up a year and a half in. The Great Recession hit, took the market a couple of years to normalize. We patented our first technology, I think 4.5 years after we opened, and just started running from there. So now saying it out loud, I sound a little crazy that we did that. And I had the great support of my wife. She never worked in the business, and we kind of divided and conquered. And our kids were young when I started the business. Our daughter was born, our son wasn't. And we just put our head down. And, when you can't lose if you don't quit. So that was the 9 years.
I'm interested in your thoughts when you think about founders listening today who they would like to get to 200 million a year in annual recurring revenue and blow past that $1 billion mark. There's so many people with opinions and there's so few people with experience. And that's probably my favorite thing about this show, is that I get to talk to people with the experience instead of just the opinion. What kind of 0 to billion lessons do you have for the rest of us?
Well, one, Jess, I love that so many opinions and so few experience. I was that founder. When you're bootstrapping it, Google is my best friend. It's like at some point you run out of the ability to Google, how do I do this? Right? And see what comes back. 0 to a billion lessons is that, I think one, you have to start with the problem that you're solving for. You have to really understand the value that you're delivering. If somebody doesn't find value in it, then you have to kind of pivot until you find that value. And you have to do the simple things savagely well. I think too much of the guru advice out there of, live your dreams and, do this or do that. It just, the practicality of it is this just business. And if you can't do the basic blocking and tackling, if you don't understand cash flow, if you don't understand, the timing of revenue to cash flow, if you don't understand the importance of that every hire matters in your first 20 hires, in your second 30 hires, your next 100 hires, that, you can't decide to be good when you get big. You got to be world-class from the time that you start. And so I believe that from the early days, you're only ever as good or as big as you think you are when you get started. And so don't act like a small business for 10 years, then think you're just going to act like a big business later. And, I think one of the biggest distractions out there, and I don't think they're all bad, but we've kind of, especially in technology, we celebrate kind of the winners of these like incubator awards. And I did a 3-week class and I was picked, startup of the, ABC University's incubator, third national, whatever. Right. And that no one's buying that. You can't pay payroll with that. Right. And so I think we just have to do the simple things well, run the business like a business, and forget all the celebrity side of entrepreneurship. I mean, you've talked to all of them, all the top successful people that have built tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions-dollar businesses, all talk about the struggle and the fight and how hard it is and how much focus and just intense focus on the business they had. They weren't around chasing trophies and awards and things. So I think it's eliminating distraction and just focusing on the problem that you solve. If you listen to the customer, they will give you they will tell you the problem. They're not always to tell you what to do, but they'll tell you the problem.
It's funny how oddly comforting that is to me to hear you say that. Like we're trying to build we've got different businesses, but the one we think is going to make us the big money is our investment fund business. And just as you were saying that, I was thinking, I was reading Steve Schwartzman's biography and talking about getting Blackstone going, and they're closing in on $1 trillion under management now. But he'd come out of like years of investment banking, had all sorts of connections, and in their early years, they couldn't get investors, and they had to make their money on M&A fees and stuff like this. And like, just as you were saying that, I thought like, I read the stories where you hear about the struggle, but do I really intellectually like sit down and go like, try to like have empathy for how hard it was, or am I just fascinated with how big they got? And like when you said that, I kind of like took a deep breath, thinking, yeah, it probably is okay that this part's hard. And like
Yeah.
thinking about our own businesses and the things that are hard for us right now, I'm going like, oh, maybe we're not special. This is hard for everyone. Maybe like you just made it feel like, oh, it's okay that it sucks right now.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, right? I mean, I tell that to my kids. They're uh 14 and 17. I'm like, look, this is supposed to be hard. Like if it's not difficult, you're not doing it right. And I think that's the result of you wanting to build another Blackstone. And if you think that big and have that much of a focus, it's going to be difficult. I kind of like it. To me, it's a barrier to entry. Is not many people are willing to do that. They love to talk about it and watch the TV shows and motivational videos, but it's brutal. And a lot of that time is you staring in the mirror, asking yourself questions that you really don't want to know the answer to, right? And are you willing to keep going? That's the fun of it, and also it's just painful sometimes.
I can't remember the exact phrase you used, but it was like something about being like relentless until you're awesome at the basics. How did you say that?
Do the simple things savagely well,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to, like, I have this saying around the company of like, I don't, when I turn and run when I hear the word strategy. So if I'm in a meeting and somebody talks about strategy, like I walk away. You can't be strategic until you have to be a hands-on operator and really know the business inside and out. That drives strategy. But just the person kind of sitting off and thinking in big platitudes and imagining, like, you have to attach that to steps, punches, and rounds, right? It's a boxing match. And so, to me, if you can't do the basics of, customer acquisition or whatever it is that you do, if you can't do that day in and day out and do it well, let's not make big plans, right? Like, you got to do small things, create big things. And in order for us to get to over 1,000 teammates, we had to be able to effectively hire the first 5 well, and the next 5 well, and be willing to learn from the things that didn't go well. Like, you mentioned the Blackstone story. I mean, they had to go work for M&A fees until they figured out the rest, right? They didn't just not do anything until the thing that they wanted came. So I think it's there's that old saying, success is not a straight line, and I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Let's talk about customer acquisition. This is obviously a pretty key thing here. When you think about the term product market fit, how do you define it?
I go back to the problem, right? Not what is the customer asking for, right? I think that's confused with product market fit. It isn't, an old Henry Ford saying, if I gave the customer what they asked for, I would have given them more horses. But really listening, get past the jargon and the acronyms and the, Gartner quadrants, and really listen to what is that person trying to get to. So for us in security, it's usually visibility. They want to increase their visibility across their infrastructure, and they want to reduce complexity. Ultimately, they're just trying to manage risk. And so I listen through the lens of what is the pain, and then I attach what we know to get them to that outcome the fastest and most efficient way. And so for me, the product market fit is, how fast and efficiently do you get your customer to that outcome, on time, on budget? And is there alignment on the problem and alignment on that outcome? And if you can be the person to get to that outcome, they stop asking you along the way, hey, how are you going to get me there? That's when you're a younger company. They're always like, well, how do you do that? How do you do that? You get to a certain scale and they're like, well, clearly you can do it. If just get me the outcome, I don't care. So to me, it's like being focused on the pain the customer's feeling or the problem that you're solving, and not getting in your own head, thinking that you're so right and everybody else is so wrong. I mean, it's the market gets a vote and the customer is the only thing that matters.
I love that answer. And it's funny all the time people ask me, like, what have you learned from these, 800 plus episodes? And like, there's a real separation when I look at the folks who in the tens of millions or maybe into the low hundreds of millions versus like the billion plus or the tens of billions. And I see like a real trend across the board of like, basically the founders who built the biggest businesses are so interested in the customer's opinion instead of their own opinion. They're so willing to listen. They're so humble to be wrong. And I find them, I don't know if you see this or if you disagree, but like, I do find them like, they listen hard. They're listening for what's wrong instead of listening for what's right. And then they go off and think really hard about what the customer didn't say or like connecting the dots that the customer doesn't know about. Like to me, I know it's really like stupidly simple, but like those three themes show up over and over and over across the $1 billion plus founders.
It's fascinating. And I love that you can correlate that. I'd say though, like it is simple, but simple things are seldom easy, and that's like, it's usually the simple things we don't want to do. Right. So I think that's fascinating. It doesn't surprise me. You have to really be passionate about the customer. And if you listen, even your biggest mistakes or errors or technology blowups are big opportunities. I've learned the most from a customer just asking like, how are we doing? And they just laying into us years ago. And out of that came, today, what a lot of our innovation in gray matter is. So if you're willing to listen and do something about it, but you do have to remove yourself from ego. You have to kind of separate.
It's almost like simplicity on the other side of complexity though. Like you said, like you can't sit in a room and think big thoughts. Like you have to go get hands on. You have to like spend time. I was reading some of your other articles about like getting on the front lines and like spending time with the customer and not getting stuck in your office. And like, it's like, this, like you even explained it. You like, you ask customer what they want, this and this and this. And you're like, what they really want is transparency. Like it was like, you have to get into the complexity and you're looking for the simplicity on the other side of it maybe, or do you see it differently?
I think is a perfect way to put it. It's actively listening and knowing when to ask questions, how to drill down, but how to make the room feel comfortable with you being generally interested in the problem. And people will talk for days if you're genuine about your interest. And I think people are too quick to turn into a sales pitch. And I talk to our sales teams about this, like, don't get happy ears. Don't pounce on the first thing that they say they need that you think you can do. And then you derail the entire conversation because there's probably more pain. Pain builds. So the first thing they talk to you about what they need is probably just the front domino. You want to get to the meat of that problem and let them keep going. And I just find, especially in enterprise technology sale, nobody gives the customer enough airtime to really talk out loud about what they're seeing and what they're feeling. And we confuse logos with people. Like, yes, they represent a large airline, but they're still a human being. So like, let them talk out loud and have an opinion and connect with them. And it doesn't matter how big you get. That's still the most important part of business, in my opinion.
Let's talk about the other way to get money, fundraising. What's the fundraising tip?
So fundraising tip is, one, make sure you really need to fundraise. So many times I work with founders and, raising capital has become a measure of success of an entrepreneur. And I think it's the wrong measure. And I want people to really understand that raising capital is the most expensive way to fund the business. And that's not something that sometimes it should be celebrated. Look, we raised capital, but we raised capital 9 years in, and we've raised 330 million of outside capital, which in terms of cybersecurity world is a low amount from what a lot of the people around us do. We're just really efficient with how we use money. Best advice I'd give is create some rules for yourself before you even start the process. What are some I will not give to these? So these 5 things or 7 things is the best advice that I got. And I still use some of the same rules today. So one, don't mess with my team, right? Like I want a partner that is going to understand and appreciate the team that we built and understand and appreciate that the run that we're on, right? And so I want to make sure that we have alignment around the product market fit and the investor fit, right? And so I've created this kind of checklist that I have. And whenever we're looking at outside investors, not that they're bad investor, that just doesn't fit into the mold that we have. So understand what's important to you. Our values, my values are very important to me. And I'd rather be worth less and have a lower valuation, but be more comfortable with the people around me around the table than chasing some big number and being on the cover of a magazine, right? So I think you have to really understand why you're raising capital and what's important to you, and then don't give in to those things because it's anybody can give you money, but why do you really want to raise capital? What else outside equity is interesting you?
You're on a roll. What's another 0 to 1 billion tip?
0 to 1 billion tip. I would say that you've got to build over time a lot of clarity around when you're smaller and you can walk into an office or get everybody together and there's 20 people there. It's really easy to drive clarity of purpose and why you're doing what you do. As you get to 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 and 100 and 200 and 300, that clarity has to stay consistent, right? And so you have to look for other vehicles to make sure that the why of the business and how that relates when Johnny or Susie sits at their workstation every morning, what the work that they're going to do, how does it contribute to that why? How does it contribute to the goal? And so we spend a lot of time on driving clarity around our I will, we will commitments, our plan, communicating that. And clarity allows for consistency and consistency allows for performance. And as growing a business, maintaining momentum, in my opinion, is just important in business as it is in sport. And momentum is the thing that allows you to kind of out athlete a bad mistake or a tech blow up or losing a big customer. If everyone has clarity of target and you understand why you're doing it, you'd be shocked what teams of people can accomplish just being aligned on a goal. And as you scale, that gets harder. So I think founders and CEOs have to simplify their messaging. A lot of people get to where they are and start companies because they're creative and intelligent and they can control a room or they're really great at building software. But as it gets bigger, you have to simplify things because you may not see everybody on a regular basis. So they have to really kind of have that clarity. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I've just found I have to simplify things much more the bigger we get.
Can you talk about what that looks like more granularly? Is it videos? Is this all hand meetings? Is this internal newsletter? Like what are some tactical ways people could go about that or what's worked for you?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things. We have ReliaQuest TV, RQTV. So we have a 3-person team, video production, editing. We've got regular TV series like Make It Possible Moments. We've got our top plays that come out every month. We've got our Exponent series. But that started with my Apple phone and filming videos on a biweekly basis to get out to all company because we had opened up an office in Vegas. We were about to open up in Dublin and I need to get the same message out. And so we do monthly town halls. We do 3 times a year, kind of all hands, getting the whole company together, global operating centers. We publish every team's commitments and what they're going to do. We're a high performance environment. We believe that we have a mindset, a way of thinking, not a culture. And so everything that we do is pointing towards those commitments that we've made. So whether it's a town hall meeting, it's a, top plays Exponent series. It's a video update. It's our onboarding process for 1 week. We teach everybody our values and how we make decisions within those values and define all of our terminology. So it's a combination of everything, but you can draw a line across all of it. It's all the same. Everybody answers the questions the same way. We define things the same way. And so that consistency allows for performance. So those are some of the ways that we do it. And it's evolved over the years, but now it's a little more structured and we have a bigger engine to put behind it so we can do some cool stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I'd love to ask a similar question when it comes to the market, and this is probably similar, some overlap with the product market fit and customer acquisition questions. But when you think about getting the word out, and so that like when your enterprise reps go to somebody, they've actually heard of you guys, and you know, you like obviously you're taking the time to do this interview here. Like you probably recognize I heard somebody call it a different $1 billion founder last week. He called it the Elon Musk School of Marketing. Like it's a lot easier to get attention for the CEO, and then the CEO can lend it to the business. Like you do the articles and stuff. When you think about your philosophies on getting the word out, having people have heard of you and heard of the company, how do you think about that? Because you can waste a lot of time and a lot of money, and then some things are very high leverage.
Yeah, I've always been a big believer in we've probably been behind on I'm a hardcore operator, very internally focused and very focused on the customer. And so where we've grown is build that brand reputation. We have large enterprise customers, they talk to other large enterprise customers. And so at one point we were probably the largest cybersecurity company nobody had heard of, and that's changed over time. But it's easier to market and brand and get loud when you have a track record of successful execution for the customer. I think where you get in trouble is too many times, especially early stage founders, get out and get too loud and they'll look at me, look at me, look at me. And there's nothing behind it. They're not building the organization. So it's a balance. I've always erred on making sure that our operations, our product, everything was running flawlessly. The customer was happy. And so I've been a little late to do things like this, and opportunities to get on. I mean, what a wonderful, successful podcast you have to be able to share this and have these conversations are great. We sponsored a bowl game, a January 1 bowl game recently in the ReliaQuest Bowl. We took over for the Outback Bowl. That was a 20 plus year institution on January 1. I think early on, trade shows and showing up where your industry is and making sure you're having meaningful conversations there, important thought leadership, all very important, but you better have something of substance behind it. Cause as you know, you've been in that investment world and they can poke through that real quick, right? You can solve for demand gen and all that stuff, but you better have a product.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question slightly different because I think you bring up really good points. So, two conversations within last month. One is somebody who has raised in the 100 million plus range, looking, board is talking to the CEO about going public in the next couple of years, and is saying, hey, you've got a great local reputation. We need you to have a national reputation pre-IPO.
Yep.
And then the other one was on Friday, and this individual, combined net worth of the business that he built is well plus the 20 billion mark, and it's saying like, I haven't really been the face of things, and I'm realizing it would actually be an advantage. So he does. Both of these folks are at that point where they do have something to talk about, but now they're going like, they're busy. They're busy running giant organizations, and they're trying to go like, okay, yes, reporters, human relate to a human better than a logo. Okay, I'm accepting I do need to become more public than I used to be. And they're thinking through, what am I going to do? What am I not going to do? And, what's my approach to moving forward? And so I just love your thought of like, okay, I do have something, thinking about what's worth my time, what's not.
Yeah. So I'm in that same position. So I relate with those two CEOs. The way I think about it is, I want to invest in things that are going to help others. So if I can get out and tell my story and somebody can listen to it and go on and build and grow, or they hear, hey, it's supposed to be hard and it makes it okay for them. Or it helps a student learn more about cybersecurity or entrepreneurship or anything, then I'm going to do it. If it's just a look at me, I'm great, I'm a founder. I will not stand at a podium and speak in the third person, but I will share experiences and thoughts and processes to help others. And others could be the cybersecurity industry. And so we're going to, however we can share and be just a good ecosystem participant. It can be into the community with, we have big programs of junior achievement and Boys and Girls Club, and we invest over 1.5 million a year and more than 4,000 volunteer hours a year everywhere we have an operating center to bring the opportunity, raise the awareness of the opportunity in and awareness of cybersecurity to elementary, middle, high school, college students. So I'll show up to all of those things this all day long because I love talking to brilliant people that are wanting to give back and do great things. And, hopefully, I'm going to learn from, speaking with you, and then hopefully others are going to learn from us both. So that's kind of how I've kind of created rules for myself
I
around
love
what
that.
I'm up to. Yeah. I have to be
I
myself, and I think I can be an operator out loud and draw attention to the logo, but I'm not going to be somebody I'm not. I'm not a showman.
To your point though, if you've actually built something, you don't need to be a showman. You just, need to not have it hidden under a blanket,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I once heard, Jamie Dimon said this to a reporter once time. They said, "Oh, what a humble person." He said, "No, no, no, not humble, but we have our humility, and there's a difference." So I thought that was an interesting way to put it. So we can tell our story, because the last thing anybody wants is somebody that's built a multi-billion-dollar company like, "Oh no, I got lucky." No, no, you didn't. Tell your story, right? But you can have humility and talk about how hard it was and how many people helped you, and how it's a team sport. So that's kind of how I think about those things.
Okay, my next one here. We've talked about 0 to billion lessons. What about billion to multi-billion?
Oh, billion and multi-billion. What immediately comes to mind is what got you here won't get you there. And there's a balance of sometimes I got to be the founder, sometimes I got to be the CEO, and those are two different roles in a company. And as you go from billion to multi-billion, there's just more protocol. Your board meetings are run differently. My time is spent differently. I'm talking to investors more. You're out making sure the investment banks know who you are, and you're showing up to those research days, because that's great marketing when they include you as a privately held company and a note around a public note, right? So where you spend your time changes, and you have to just to accept that maybe the things that you loved early on aren't the things that you get to do anymore. And one of the things from a leadership perspective that I found is get out of the way. Too often as you're growing, when you're a billion and far before that, but you can't swoop in and just jive into an issue and, create this grenade of confusion and then think you're just going to go back to your CEO role, right? It's like, how can you be most effective getting your team members to the outcome? Be a coach, be an advisor, but you can't get on the field and make the play anymore because it's too big of an organization. Like, you as an individual can't change any one thing anymore. The machine is too big. So how do you make sure the machine has what it needs? And so you're looking down the road a little bit more. It's always, for me, we promote from within 50% of the time. So I'm always looking across for like leadership gaps. Where do we need to develop people? I teach 50% of our leadership academies. So it's a 3-month program. And I teach half of it. And because I want to ensure the repeatability of the business. And so how do you become a force multiplier when you used to be able to kind of, go make the sale? Now, how do I support 30 sales? Right. And so I think that's the tips and tricks, is making yourself more multiple as you get bigger, is that toggle between having the creativity of a founder, but having also the kind of multiple thinking way of being a true CEO.
Makes me think about Andy Grove when he was kind of the Elon Musk of his time in Intel payday,
Yeah,
talking about
only the
how.
paranoid survived, right? I mean, no truer statement in business. Yeah, so
But
absolutely.
he talked. I mean, it's interesting that you teach half the leadership academy. He said like training is one of the highest leverage activities a CEO can do. So it's interesting to see you living what Andy believes.
Well, one of my first job ever was public supermarkets, and they promote from within. And I went in at 16, and the first thing I learned was a store manager. A lady asked me where the ketchup was, a customer did, and I'm like, "Well, I think it's over there." And she walked away, and he said, "Hold on, ma'am. Brian, come with me." Walked her over to the aisle, showed her every different kind, where it is, what, and he turned to me, and she walked away all happy. He said, "Brian, this is Publix. We don't point to the aisle. We walk them over there. We show them every brand." And that is really where I started to learn my customer centric focus. And it's a, you know, $40 billion largest private ESOP in the world, 190,000 employees. So they're doing something right. So I think, but their leaders train, their leaders build others, their leaders are measured on how many people they get promoted along the way, and I've just always felt like my job was to train my replacement. And so I think it works. I think Andy was right. I love that, his book, Only the Paranoid Survive. There's a lot to be learned reading the stories of others. That's why I love this podcast and what you're doing, because it just allows us to kind of throw some AirPods in and walk around.
Well, listen, if people want to find out more about the business, what's the website? Where should they be going online?
Yeah, ReliaQuest.com. It's Brian Murphy, ReliaQuest, on LinkedIn, and Brian Murphy RQ on Twitter. We're out there, Google search away. We've got Do the Things podcast on Apple and Spotify, where we talk a lot about mental performance and the active. You don't have to be sick to get better, active approach to high performance. And so a lot of these themes come out there, whether it's an athlete, a fellow CEO, a military operator. You start to draw some lines that, how you think impacts how you feel, and how you feel impacts how you perform.
Such solid advice. Just staying on your podcast for a minute, I'm interested in what you feel like the value of doing that. It's a commitment to keep those things up. So
It is. We have Darren McMains, DMAC. He's our director of mental performance, and he's got a unique background where he was the pro athlete, pro baseball player, head director of mental performance for the San Francisco Giants, won 3 world championships. And we've had this mental performance position for years, back to 2014. And we do a mind gym internally. We open up every meeting with a mindset moment. And originally it was, look, our content, sometimes we capture people, back to your question of how do you get this consistent message out across the company? Well, sometimes it's our Teams channel, it's our town hall meetings, but a lot of our content, people were coming back to us, listening to our customer. At this point, our teammates were like, hey, I'd love it if it was a podcast format. So we did an internal podcast. It's hard for me to listen to that. Let's put it on Spotify. And then what happened is a lot of our customers started listening to it, and they started asking, hey, a lot of what we've solved for them isn't always technical. They're leaders. They're trying to grow teammates. They're trying to, this stuff is great. Can you open it up to us? So it grew out of, demand, internal demand. And now it's, hey, if this is content, back to that question of, is it content that can help people on a broader scale? Let's just push it live. So that's kind of the life cycle there. And we have fun doing it. It makes us better. I'm sure you would agree. It makes you think a little deeper about the things that you're doing and the intention or intentionality behind those things. So that's how it came about. It's fun.
And so one more time, if people are on Apple or Spotify searching for it, the name of the podcast?
Do the Things. Yeah. It's powered by ReliaQuest. Yeah. Yeah. So do the things that other people aren't willing to do. That's been kind of my motto in entrepreneurship.
It sounds so good. I'm gonna go listen to it now. So
good. There's some great stuff on there. So yeah, it's great. That'd be great.
Well, I appreciate you making the time for this. This has been great.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on, and appreciate the work that you do.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll let everyone go now.